do think that, let's say over the last 4 years, in general, our industry has learned a lot, and I think the Summer Olympics of 2012 in London, where it raised the bar in terms of what you needed to do, right? NBC did have at some point a blackout, if you may call, where transmission didn't happen. I don't have the details behind it, but I do know, for example, that in the they had one of the bicycle races that they were tracking, and everybody was so excited, and they all had their cell phones there, and they were taking not only pictures but video, HD video, that they were sitting through the 4G network, and cyclists could not. The broadcasters could not know where the cyclists were because they were not able to get the GPS feeds off of the cycles, and they ran into a lot of problems. And then BT came out, and the organizing committee came out and said, guys, if you could, please don't, because we don't want to, ruin the transmission for the rest of the world. So there are certain things that happened, and I think BT actually did a very good job. And I'm not just trying to say I don't have any relationship with BT, but I think it was very, very different these Olympics from what we had, let's say, 4 years before, because now you have people on all sorts of devices, and they're not just viewers, right? They're capturing data, so they're content generators, and at the same time, they're viewers, and at the same time, you have it on different devices and platforms, and they really stretch the underlying network to the limit, right? So that raises automatically the bar for the events that we have, coming up in the World Cup in June in Brazil, and then the Olympics in Rio 2 years thereafter, and any other, let's say, live events that you have. It's very, very clear that the game is different, right? This is not just about unidirectional transmission of data the old broadcast way. This is about bidirectional transmission of data, and you need to have a very, very robust network, and building those networks is not easy. And it's not, these cost a lot of money, and having them just available for the event is a complicated financial equation that a lot of people need to get into. And we're starting to see that right now in Brazil, where it is the government that is responsible to actually build to the venues. And even though our former owner of GlobeNet, Oi, is the main sponsor for the World Cup, they're just bringing the feeds from the IBC to our cable or to others so we can distribute it to the world. But from the venue to the International Broadcast Center, that's the government's responsibility. And it is very difficult to justify a business case, because once the event is over, you're going to be sitting there with a huge infrastructure that perhaps can or cannot be used. So I think the equation is different, and I think a lot of the people in our space are saying, okay, how can we justify it, or when will we get a payback on that infrastructure? But what is clear is that the end user, to some extent, is driving it, because they want to have a phenomenal end user experience on their device, whatever that device is, in real time of what's actually going on in a particular event. So it's some great challenges that we have ahead.
Absolutely, challenges. The number of entities that have to come together is really expanding, and as you say, it's kind of raising the bar, and I'm sure over the next few years that will continue. We'll talk maybe a little bit about that too, but let me switch a little bit to the other side. We talked about consumers and the broadcast media, but also on the enterprise side, and what's happening there in terms of the flexibility and how content gets distributed and managed and monitored so that the end user experience is sufficient. You want to talk a little about that, Mark?
Before we do that, can I just
Sure.
comment on some of the media stuff here? Because I just wanted to make a contrast, because I think what Eric said is absolutely right. The broadcasters or the customers that we all have in that marketplace expect, in a sense, the big events like the Olympics to be burstable from a transport perspective. But it's burstable over like a 2 or 3 week period, right? You've got to build that infrastructure, and they expect to use it, and then they expect it to go away, or we deal with it. And that's really complicated. We plan for 2 years in advance with the broadcasters for something like the Olympics. You then move, closer to home for an event that takes place in a stadium like this, and they expect it to be burstable for the 4 hours or 5 hours of the duration of the game. And so we have a big network that connects, that we can turn up feeds across the network and then turn them down again. And then at the other extreme is the breaking news for the broadcasters. They literally phone us up with 10 minutes to go to air and say I need a feed from here to here. And they may do a 10-minute feed to camera and then turn it down again, want it turned down again. So there's a huge expanse of what it means to be burstable from a broadcast perspective, from the breaking news through the more scheduled sports to the massive one-off global events. The underlying technologies in all cases are very similar, but there's differences in scale and planning and complexity, and obviously the commercial nature of what we do.